Hello, everybody. We're going to have another episode of Connect This. And this is the Big Time Opportunity Edition. There's a lot of exciting things happening. And on top of that, we have our first full repeat cycle of guests. We have only veterans this time, and this is very exciting. I'm going to introduce our guests. First, I'll introduce Kim McKinley, the Chief Marketing Officer of Utopia. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Chris.
It is wonderful to have you back. For folks that are familiar, I advertised that Joanne Hovis was going to be on the show in order to try and get more people to come, and then switched out for Kim, who is an industry veteran after Joanne unfortunately had to get called away at the last second. So we are going to try and get Joanne Hovis back. So if you are interested in seeing her, you should tune into every single show we do until she comes back. Also have
great marketing, Chris.
Well, you would know, so now I feel really good about that. We also have Doug Dawson, who is the everything of CCG Consulting. Welcome to the show.
This is my third time here, and I still haven't gotten any wings. I just want to let you know that. So
they are cold when we ship them, unfortunately.
I'm okay with that. So.
Right now, I'm excited. I got to remember this for like a few days before we do the next show, because I'm going to send you a little package.
All right.
We also have our longtime champion and the person that has made us want to do this show over and over again, Travis. Hey, why are we talking about the federal government again? Carter, who's with USI Fiber.
Yep. Hello, everyone. And of course, our esteemed leader, Mr. Christopher Mitchell.
Right. Christopher, because I said so, Mitchell.
Yes.
From the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. So we are back again in this topic, and I feel like it's really important because the federal government is enabling all kinds of interesting local stuff to happen, both public-private partnerships, municipal investments, bad ideas probably will also be funded, but we want to talk about all of these different opportunities. Before we get there, though, there's been some interesting news in the past week, and we're going to do a quick reaction to some part of the White House announcement about what it intends to do on broadband. So there's been a lot of interesting details that are coming out. The cable lobbyists are really angry, and they might have to actually work for their money for a little bit here. So Kim, give me a sense of what your very quick reaction is to some part of the White House announcement.
I think the biggest thing that we saw was that they're prioritizing community-owned networks. And that has been a real big change from the former FCC, which were prioritizing bigger the incumbent network. So I'm super happy to see it. It looks like a complete 180 of what happened in the last administration. So coming from a community-owned network, we believe that's a huge step for the country.
Awesome. Doug, what's your reaction to the various news releases?
I read it, and I'd be honest to you, Chris. I said, do you think somebody at the White House is reading my blog? Because I could have written it. I could have written the damn thing. I mean, I have written that in pieces. This is exactly what I've been proposing, and it's mind-boggling to see at least a second person somewhere agrees with me.
There are people in the White House that are reading your blog, I'm pretty sure, and I want you to stop writing so they'll be forced to read me instead.
Okay.
Travis, do you have a quick reaction?
I was like, wow, Doug wrote the bill in Washington. Pretty impressive, but are they still promoting 25.3 in this, or is it too early?
Well, we don't know what the actual.
What are they stepping up to?
Well, we don't know yet, but it's much
30-10. I mean, are we
no. But so this is one of the things, Travis. I'm not gonna. My heart's been broken before. I'm not gonna go too far out there, but they are talking about
here in the United
setting
States.
A robust standard because they are tired of the I don't know if I'm just going to go out there and say it. Like, this could be a little bit of a blue episode, and they're tired of chicken shit updates. Like, I think they really want to actually have high quality networks built, and they're tired of this little penny ante, a little bit here, a little bit there. They want to get the job done.
I think you can see that when they put in the future-proof infrastructure, right?
Right.
They're not talking about wireless or satellite or whatnot. They're like future-proof, which is really aiming directly at fiber.
I mean, future-proof to me, man, a network that's still going to be good 50 years from now. That got rid of Chris's chicken shit stuff. So absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, for me, this is when I was reflecting on it because a number of tech columnists like to, at least one reached out to me, and then I wrote a big long response that had zero impact on the person's writing. It's nice to be asked anyway. but I was forced to reflect on this because otherwise I just ignore this stuff unless someone actually asks me my opinion and forces me to put it down. And this to me, it harkens back to 1935. It was not obvious that we would solve electrification by moving away from the big electric companies. When it was proposed in the administration, there were co-ops. States had been encouraging co-ops for some period of time. And it was a method that had worked in some cases and didn't work in some others, perhaps. But it was not at all obvious. And there was confusion in opposition within FDR's White House as to whether or not this was a good idea. But they went down that path and it worked really well and it changed everything. And I feel like if the Biden White House is up for it, this could also be the moment in which we change our future from one in which Comcast gets to get us up to over $100 a month, something, Doug, you've talked about in previous episodes, into something in which we actually have some real competition and there's real price discipline and we have more communities able to control their own futures. That was a really great question from me, huh?
That was
great.
That was more than 30 seconds.
Oh yeah, but we're in the discussion. We're in the discussion part now. So
we are.
Haven't we had this conversation every week for 10 years?
Yeah.
So what do you really think changed this time around with this new piece of paper?
Well, first of all, it's not paper yet, Travis. So I don't want to get your hopes too high.
Well,
right.
This new post. What do you think really is going to change at the end of the day?
Unfortunately, this thing has a huge uphill battle because there's already a bill sitting in front of Congress that's about 180 degrees different than this.
Okay.
And so this approach is the first adult sane approach I've seen in the market. I mean, not because I agree with it, just because it's well thought out. It's not only talking about bringing better broadband to the rural areas, but it's talking about fixing pricing in the urban areas. It's suggesting to me, I think if you read between the lines, it's suggesting urban co-ops. I mean, this thing is talking about fixing broadband shortages, and it mentions enough people don't have broadband that they're talking about urban people. And so, I think this is it's a transition. It's a seismic shift and resetting the conversation all over again. So that's what I think this is. Now, this is a long way to go to actually make all these things happen, but it's the first time anyone in the federal government has suggested what's in that. That thing is all brand new. Well, nothing in there has been suggested at the federal level by a federal official for many years. So.
Let me go out on a limb and say that I feel like Tom Wheeler was kind of heading in this direction, but the Obama White House was working on other things and didn't want to make this that much of a priority. So I don't want to pretend that like some of the work that's been done by others who did, John Sallet working at the FCC as well, really favored pro-competition policies. So this is the first time a president has taken this kind of interest in it. But Kim, how are you reacting to it? I mean, I'm serious about having my heart broken before. Like I feel like, like I don't want to get my hopes up and the cable companies are gonna be like, hey, we have a say too.
I agree with Travis and I agree with Doug. I think it's an uphill battle of where this really goes realistically. Because I agree with Doug. Everything on this piece of paper, we've all been preaching. Everybody on this call has been preaching for years, right? Yep. But does it get through? I love the transparency in pricing because I think that is a problem in this industry of the bait and switch and not understanding where the fees are coming from. So I am pro this bill, but I am I'm kind of hesitant to get my hopes up too much as well, Chris, because I think we know this industry, we know the lobbyists, we know the power of the telecom lobby, and what can actually get through is going to be another. It will be interesting to see. Let's just say it that way. But I think there's more support than ever for this kind of bill.
And that's the point I wanted to make quick, Doug. I'll give you in a second, but I feel like this is an opportunity where people can come out and be like, yes. And if people are going to be silent and no one's going to say anything and they're just going to sort of hope that'll happen, it's not going to happen. But if elected officials hear a lot of people saying, yes, this is what we want. We want real competition. We want price transparency. We just want this stuff to work. That's where I feel like elected officials might be willing to force the cable industry to take some, to take a back seat to the public interest for once.
Well, he's certainly setting himself up to get his heart broken again. Oh boy.
Well, I guess I'm curious, Kim, how would this change Utopia's life if this.
I don't know if it would at all, right?
10 times bigger. When then I have to start
Yes.
opposing you because you're too big.
That's okay. Thanks, Chris. I thought we were friends, but I think one of the things in here is removing the barriers for municipal broadband, right? So in Utah, we are prohibited to offer retail services, even if we chose to. I don't think if that legislation changed, we would even provide retail because we think we're in the correct model of being the infrastructure, but it could, right? That is one that we could go out and start competing against our service providers. But yet again, we've talked about this internally for many years and said, what if that happened? And we all agree that that is not the right move. And we believe it's a great partnership from the cities and the private ISPs coming together.
But even there's things that Utopia could do differently. You could decide to be the provider of the low income broadband, because that's really unfair to ask the ISPs to do that. I mean,
absolutely.
You could work with them under this structure and finish all the gaps. And so the fact is, this would give you new options you don't have today. So, and that might be as far as you go, but the good news is every single little city or co-op or nonprofit has those same options. They can go any direction they want. That's what we've always all wanted. So
it's the flexibility to make change. Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, we always historically talk about small towns and rural in this conversation. Do you envision that this brings competition to Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit, and other major metropolitan areas? Or is this bill solely focused on small town America?
It all depends what it means when it says truly find a way to stop. It suggests to temporarily subsidize low-income broadband, but then find a way to get off of it. Well, the only real way to get off of it is to start urban cooperatives. I mean, there's no other real, we're not going to, the only alternative would be price controls by a very strong FCC. And I just can't see that ever making it through.
When we say urban cooperatives, I think you mean like a municipal structure as well, but you mean broadly like a nonprofit approach.
Cooperative is not municipal; it's cooperative. It's owned by the customer.
Well, you said it's the only option. That's why I was confused. I mean, Los Angeles could create a municipal network that focused on low-income folks.
And it talks about cooperatives, nonprofits, or municipalities, all three, and it gives them all three equal basis and footing. But there could be those things created, which would give low-income folks an alternative and would give everybody else an alternative. And it would certainly act to pull down prices from Comcast. We're not going to $150 broadband if this is allowed to happen, because cities will react if they, I already think cities will react. I believe there are cities that we have $150 broadband are just going to build fiber.
We're seeing that, right? Like Tucson is doing free wireless service. They're a very large city without a history of doing this. There are other cities that have many hundreds of thousands that are doing tests in this area.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that we'll see with ARPA, and we're going to move over to talking about the money from the American Rescue Plan Act that's already available. But I'm expecting that we will see more cities and counties getting involved in this, perhaps using Dane's model, where they would just only do dark fiber, and maybe Utopia would come in and use it, or maybe some private company would, or a combination. Who even knows? But there's a lot of different models that we could see, I think, now that we have this money available that we're about to talk about in the next segment.
But I think, Chris, wouldn't you say, and I think this is to Travis's point, I think the bigger cities would get into this, but my biggest fear is how is it executed? How are the people who are actually making this happen? Do they even know what they're looking at? And I think that's a big concern of the city officials who get this money or who see this, and then they're like, execution.
Yeah, let me, Doug, let me layer onto that, because that's exactly the right question. When I look at San Francisco and Seattle, I see big time dumb politics getting in the way of this. What cities need to do is to be like, there's a very big problem and we need to solve it with some low key, smart, strategic investments that aren't really going to make me the governor. And that is what has gotten in the way. And I feel like that's the dynamic that has to change.
And I would agree. I mean, Seattle is just the perfect test case for that. I mean, Seattle got in their own way when they decided that every group of 15 houses could vote on whether they get a little box put in their neighborhood. I mean, can you imagine being an ISP and trying to put your network in when you have to go to 15 or 20 houses and go, can I put a pedestal in your neighborhood? And they get the vote. I mean, this is a city who has no business being in the broadband business.
Well, let's also be clear that people have a righteous rage against CenturyLink that is part of the reason.
I
that
understand.
people have that want to do that sort of overreaction.
But the city would apply the same rules to themselves. Large cities are not necessarily going to make good ISPs, but that doesn't mean they can't build fiber and make it available for other people to work on it. So, right. Okay.
So I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about the billions of dollars that are going to enable some interesting results before the Biden plan ever gets its vote. So before we do that, though, we have to do the fan favorite, because a few people told me they liked it, section.
Because one person said
three out of 11 viewers. Yeah.
It could have been 2 people, and at least one of them was not related to me. So this is a tower. I don't know. I can't always see the screen of how it's coming across.
We can. Yes.
So Travis, what's going on here above the tree line?
Oh, this is a good one. I'm going. I'm going public safety radio network at the top.
That's this white thing
with those omnis, and I'm going to go backhaul 1 to. It's a relay site for 2 different networks, and it looks like there's also some sort of omni public safety radio, maybe 800 megahertz, a little further down there.
That this
going up. And to your right there's an antenna going up and down.
That thing there, right?
Yep. So that would be my guess.
I would agree. And this doesn't have any customers on it. This is purely relay station.
No.
Right?
Yeah. And they're probably just relaying their radio network. No different than, it kind of reminds me, I don't know, Doug, if you remember the old ham radio repeater sites. That's what this reminds me of.
Yep, these are what you see out in the West a lot of, because there's long distances to cover. Yep.
Excellent.
Well,
I'm glad that was interesting. And anyone wants to send in their pictures, I will be happy.
So you didn't did he get it right, Chris? You didn't say if he got it right.
He doesn't know.
I was just driving by.
No.
Chris has no idea.
We could make up anything. Yeah.
It sounded really good, didn't it?
I should have come up with an alternate story. I apologize.
Wait till the one that comes up. I don't know what it is. I have an answer for that one.
I want to get up to see if I can find some of those antennas up in northern Wisconsin, where they have the very ultra low frequency they use to communicate with the nuclear submarines.
Right.
Yeah, those are the tough ones, or the ones in Hawaii that are on the big barges. The big domes, the big Doppler radars, those are not easy to any military thing would be more difficult.
Okay. So people should trespass on military bases to get us photos that Travis can make things up about. Do not do that.
Nothing illegal here. Nothing illegal.
I am wearing orange. So we're going to talk about all this money that's heading to communities and try to give communities some advice and also a sense of what's coming their way. So I wanted to first go through these line by line. I identified 5 of the programs. One we'll do really quick. Doug or Kim, do you have anything to add about the EBB, since we talked about it 2 weeks ago? And I'm sure that you've rewatched that episode multiple times for all of the wisdom that it contained.
I have nothing to add. I thought you covered it well. So, yeah.
I think it will be interesting to see how it's played out. We do like that Utopia. We believe Utopia can qualify for the EBB. So they have expanded their reach for who can apply, which we have never been able to apply for one of these federal programs before. So we love to see that. So,
and that's because the rules usually require that you have a direct relationship with customers. Mm-hmm. And so they haven't bothered to figure out how that works for the open access networks. But it seems like they're willing to work through that here. That's awesome.
So we're super happy. Yeah.
And for other folks, Travis is now officially in the EBB program. And in future episodes, we'll talk about how that's going for you.
We can talk about how he can no longer say so many bad things about federal programs.
Well, we did. And I don't know why all of a sudden we got approved after the last meeting, but thank you for the show. Yes, we are approved, and we are going to put our first customer on next Monday.
Awesome.
So that is
congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah. So for people who are confused, a lot of the EBB providers, the emergency broadband benefit, may not be starting theirs until the FCC program actually opens up the window. But Travis is going his own way to maximize benefits, and we discussed that in the previous show. Mm-hmm. So there is $130 billion going to local governments as part of the American Rescue Plan Act. This is money that can be used broadly for a variety of things. One of the things that is explicitly named is broadband and water infrastructure. 65 billion of that is going to counties, 65 billion of it is going to cities and towns. There's an amount going to tribes. And this is money that we would expect in some cases will be spent on broadband. And I'll just couple that really quickly because I think it's relevant to $340 billion that's going to states. And we would expect some states to pass that down or put it into their broadband programs. Other states may actually just give it in lump sums to localities. And so there are many localities that are getting on the order of 25 to 50% of their yearly budget in terms of this money, some of which will plug holes, but there's a lot of excess money that can be used for smart investments. So any comments on this and this sort of tranche of money before we cover some of the other ones that are more related to broadband?
I actually, before we comment on it, we have to really add these in to the 10 billion also.
Sure.
Because and the reason we have to do that is you had mentioned cable lobbyists before. There is a massive amount of arm wrestling going on in DC this week, as you can well imagine, because Treasury is the one giving all this money away. And so what's happening is,
Doug, let me just back up for a second.
Yes.
So this money is going out in the next 3 weeks. I think half of the money has to go out in the next 3 weeks.
Right.
Now, Treasury is writing rules on their $10 billion that's going to go to the states. Almost every state is getting at least $100 million. New York is getting like $350 million. So most states are getting an amount in between there. And that money we're expecting will only be usable for broadband, most likely, but Treasury is writing those rules, and that money is expected to be available over the summer. So that's, I think, essential background for what you're about to say.
But I also think Treasury believes their rules are going to apply to any broadband piece of the other pieces of money as well. At least Treasury does. Well, that's the big fights that are going on.
He said having no legal expertise or having previously considered the question.
Yes. And so, of course, what's happening at Treasury is the language is like 3 sentences long on how to spend this money. And so they're trying to bring in rules. And of course, the cable lobbies are suggesting what those rules may be. Like none of this money can be used unless the speeds are less than 25.3 and on and on and on. What I hear is Treasury is heavily resisting that. And in fact, Treasury was very buoyed last week when the White House rules came out because they went, aha, we don't have to listen to you, cable lobby. So that was actually a savior for that discussion, I believe. We'll find that out. But it's still, the arm wrestling is not done, and there's a lot of powerful forces in Washington trying to put rules on that money. And if rules get put on it, it may become a lot less useful. The real issue with all this money is states are very differently. I mean, what you can do in Rhode Island is very different than what you can do in Utah. In Rhode Island,
similar states, Doug. I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, Rhode Island, there's really hardly anybody that has under 25.3, but what they have there is a lot of poor people and school kids who don't have broadband. The money there is likely to end up going to the cable companies and stuff to connect more customers. Like it or not, that's really the best way for them to use that money, most likely. There's, Verizon Fios might get it to do fiber instead, but it's going to go to make connections. Well, that doesn't make any sense for rural states. And so in order for that money to be useful, the feds really got to get out of the way and let the states each do what makes sense for them. That's what really matters here. So any rule they put on is going to end up hurting some states. I mean, the goal is to have almost no rules on this money. And that's any rule is just going to be dreadful. It's going to be dreadful for some people if they put even one rule on it. So.
And I'll have to go back and I'm curious about a legal interpretation, but it would be interesting to me if this somehow is considered to be controlling of money that was given under an obviously much more permissive grant to states and localities for other purposes. So I would expect that even if it's more clear than I think it is, there's going to be lawsuits about it, I'm sure.
Oh, there's always going to be lawsuits. I'll stop talking here soon, but one of the interesting things with this money is that some of the states have already told localities how much they're getting. So the states are not really thinking about putting many rules on it. And some states will. Some states can't help themselves. There's no way that California, New York, Illinois, and Washington State are not going to put rules on it. Because they put rules on everything. But a lot of states have already said, I'm sending this to you cities. You do what the heck you want with it.
That is what's
Cities are
happened
already
here in
making
Utah.
cities are already making their wish list of buy a new fire truck. I mean, their cities have a shopping list ready in a lot of cases. So this is going to get, if there's any legal fights, it's going to get really interesting really fast. So
I
Go
think
ahead,
it really, yeah, I think it really depends on how the money is disseminated, like for
right.
the states, right? In Utah, they've already, like, I think it was almost 2 weeks ago that the cities got emails of how much
Right.
they were getting and
Right.
allocated. So now our phones are ringing off the hook of like, okay, we have all this money. How do we use it? Is because I think a lot of cities were just shocked about how much money they were getting
Right.
and what can they do with it. So I think I think you're right, Doug. I think it's a per state basis. And I think they need to go back into, the Biden's plan and get out of the way and let these cities build like they want to. But one of the concerns that I've heard over and over is we don't want overbuilding. We don't want overbuilding. And I'm like, don't you want competition in your marketplace? You're
Well,
like,
and let's be clear.
You have
I mean,
to.
the overbuilding is a generally Republican talking point, which is directly from the cable and telephone lobbyists who make that case because they argue that it will be wasteful because it's unnecessary, but also they believe because the localities will have no idea what they're doing, that this is just far too complicated for them to figure out. So when we hear that, the concern about overbuilding, it is something that I hate over generalizing regarding the partisan nature of some of this, but it is almost entirely from the Republican side lately.
Now, interestingly, there's no locality who's going to get this money who's not already done a broadband study and go, let's just build fiber. There's not enough time for that. Now, if they've already thought about it and done the math and had the engineers out, there may be we'll probably can count on less than two hands of people who actually build brand new networks with this money. There will be towns who call in ISPs and make quick public-private partnerships. And it's hard for the big ISPs to hate that. If somebody gives it to Travis, they can't really complain it's overbuilding, but because they're hoping someone gives it to them.
Well,
so the big ISPs are sort of in a bind because in some of the states, like again, Rhode Island, I think that the big ISPs are hoping all this money ends up in their pocket. So, how can they love it there and hate it in other states? So it's a real dilemma for them.
The money has to be spent by the end of 2024.
Right.
So if you already have a plan and you can try to break ground by the end of this summer, why can't you fund a substantial part
if you already have a plan, there's not that many people that have a plan. Really.
Okay, so that's what you were saying.
Yeah. I think that if you started now and you were a reasonable sized community and you did a decent partnership, that you could have a network built by 2024. But maybe that's my perspective.
Well, also, I don't think this money is going to be enough to build a broadband network.
Yeah.
It's going to be a piece of the funding. You still got to find more money. And
let's talk about this though. So Travis and I have been going over this because, I've wanted to see some investment in some areas in Minnesota here and long felt that whether it was Travis or whether it was another ISP that's independently minded, that there could be some interesting approaches, whether it's along the line of what West Des Moines is doing with Conduit or what Dane has proposed with dark fiber, things that would allow a city to build assets that they could lease, perhaps for a price, perhaps for a certain return on like offering low income services. And Travis, as you and I have discussed this, like I feel like that we're looking at a city like St. Paul, which is getting, I think, on the order of $100 million. I don't even think we could spend all that money that fast. So there's more. It strikes me that the limitation is not the amount of money in this case.
Well, and there's a real issue. Just let's be frank. If you're an independent ISP and you're going to ride on somebody else's network, you're not really building a lot of enterprise value for yourself. So why would you do it? I mean, there's virtually no incentive to go into an area that somebody else is going to conduit. You're going to have to charge relatively low priced internet, and you're going to take all the customer service calls, tech support, billing. You're going to take all the crap without getting any of without getting any of the benefit. So it's honestly, what's going to happen with this money? I think Doug just alluded to it. A few people are going to be successful. The rest is going to be like every other program we've talked about forever. The money's going to disappear into the ether. Nobody's going to know where it's at. And we're going to move on to next year's plan. That's just my opinion.
So, Doug, you want to react to this, but I really want to bring this back to Kim and ask just how many job applications are you vetting right now? Because I can imagine that there's people that you're working with that are doing nothing but trying to hire people. But quick, Doug, you had a funny expression on your face there.
Well, I happen to agree with both of them. I'm torn in half here, and I just got to rip myself out.
It's me, Doug. It's me.
Yeah.
Don't pay attention to
Pick me, Doug. Pick me.
Yeah. The fact is, an awful lot of this money wound up being wasted because there'll be, when it goes to big cities like St. Paul, if they tried to spend $100 million on broadband, they would spend $30 million of it studying it, and then like, well, the time is gone. And that's not a fault. Big cities really can't pull the trigger.
It's nice that you call St. Paul a big city. We appreciate that. I don't think anyone's proposing
I think you're
that
a lot
all of the
bigger.
money would
You're
be
a lot
spent on
bigger
broadband.
city than the places where Utopia is at. So.
Thanks, Doug. I thought we were friends.
Little cities could very well just go and do it. The fact is, Travis is absolutely right. I've always thought that if a city just gets the broadband built, even if they don't have an ISP in mind, the fact is it's done. There's gigabit broadband sitting there. They will eventually do it themselves. They can do what Provo did and sell it to an ISP for $1. The fact is they need to build it.
Okay, let's be honest.
This money
thing was a terrible decision.
Oh, it was a horrible. Well, it was a terrible decision, but it really wasn't. I mean, the city was losing $6 million a year, and the politics were ugly.
The city's still paying for it, though.
Oh,
yeah. Still had to pay for it.
I feel like it's impossible to describe. It's like you're sitting, in an outhouse in which the floor gave out, and people are trying to figure out what's the best situation, how do you improve upon it? And it's like there's not a lot of good that can happen at that point. So I don't like putting too much blame on iProvo or Provo for where they ended up, given the way the Comcast and CenturyLink used the legislature to hamstring them. But I take Doug's point well. This is in some ways free money, right? If a city bonds, it has different expectations for getting a return on that than if it gets money from the federal government. And so it could very well build assets that it would lease at a song and still consider itself to have come out ahead.
And I think this is where Utopia is looking at this, and we're looking at this very differently, of using some of this money as a backstop to reduce the level of risk as cities enter into these agreements, right?
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so it's if you have a $15 million project, and you don't want to leverage $15 million of your bonding capacity, put $5 million worth of this and bond for 10. So they still have a stake in the game, but they're using the federal dollars to get themselves leveraged into a place of building these networks, which we believe is a smart way to do it.
And that is smart. Yeah. That's absolutely smart. Yes.
Yeah. So, and I agree with you, Travis. I understand why, even though I was opposed to your statement, I agree with what you're saying, because the margins are really low for ISPs to jump on with these networks. And why would they do that? I agree that if you have a large enough market share, it makes sense. But
if you have the ability as a private company to go out and get debt financing to build a network, why would you now? If the federal government or the state or whichever branch of government wanted to come in and say, here, we'll put 50 cents up, you guys put 50 cents up, and we're going to build this area that maybe is hard to put debt on. All right, that's interesting, but then who owns it?
So Travis, let's just go back to many of the conversations you and I have had, and I'll phrase it this way. When you were starting your company with the dial-up rack of modems and stuff like that, did you have the ability to go get debt financing?
Yeah, very little.
That's where I feel like what's one of the most interesting.
And that's why I've promoted the idea that these programs should be, there should be a piece of it for starter loans for ISPs. That can't get the first $1 million. The first $1 million is the hardest one to get, because you have to understand the financing piece is only 10% of the ISP puzzle. I mean, there's a lot of other things to do to run a successful internet provider, and financing is only a piece of it. But if you can't get over that first 10% hurdle, you're dead in the water. And that's why these WISPs all over the country serving these communities are struggling so bad and to make the jump to fiber, because they're used to buying these $500 radios that service 100 customers. 25.3 just fine, but they're stuck. What are they going to do? So I'm a real fan of using this money to help private companies move into fiber plants. Not give it to some cities who are going to do worry about who are you hiring to put the conduit in the ground? Can you put, oh my God,
So Travis, you're breaking my heart now. It's a very hard day on my heart.
Yeah. Well, I'm just being real, right?
I appreciate that you're being real, but I also just feel like, this is what we heard about like cities when it came to electricity, and a lot of cities in the 1900s and the 1910s, like screwed it up, and there were challenges, and they figured it out. And I feel like it's not going to be necessarily pretty, but like, I feel like when we get into this discussion, there's a certain sense in which people forget what the bar is. And it's a classic joke of like when you're sitting there camping with your friend and a bear walks up and your friend starts lacing up his shoes, and you're like, what are you doing? You're not going to outrun a bear. I don't have to outrun the bear. I got to outrun you, dummy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what we're talking about here. Like the municipality doesn't have to be Elon Musk if we accept that as a pinnacle of achievement. The municipality has to do it better than a cable and telephone company, which are basically trying to like just figure out how to do the bare minimum and extract the most wealth from the community. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be better than the crappy system we're living in.
But it's all mandated by the speed. If you're going to borrow or give people grants for 25.3, then you've already created your own problem.
Right. Well, that's not happening here. Like, that's why we're good there.
If you were to say, all right, the minimum to get federal dollars is gigabit symmetrical, you've now solved the problem. There's nowhere that these wireless providers can go. They've got to put fiber in the ground. And that's where we ultimately, this isn't free money. This is our tax dollars we all pay. We should want to utilize these tax dollars for maximum benefit. And to me, it's getting fiber into every home in the country.
I actually think some of it is free money, but we're not going to get into modern monetary.
Yeah, I guess we can, we can just print it, right? Yeah.
But I would like to react to what he just said, because I've never been a fan of free money.
Agree. I very much don't like it either.
Because without the strings attached, I don't really like the idea of states going every single town, here's how much you get, versus, here's how much the region gets. Why don't you all come to us with a plan? So the problem is many cities are just going to do terrible things with this money. It's a one-time shot, and if they haven't thought about broadband, they don't know what to do with it. And so it's not really a fair thing to just dump it on them and go, here's your money. Oh, wow, you didn't use it well.
Well, the worst is they put a couple Wi-Fi
there are cities like this. Her cities who are already planning on joining Utopia, they're going to use it perfectly. But it's all the cities who are not prepared to do that who are going to have a real problem with what to do.
Oh, Doug, we can take any city across the country. You don't worry about us.
Well, I tell you what. Please let me know when you're coming to all the areas surrounding Asheville and in the Appalachian Mountains here.
You never know. But Travis, my question to you is: do you think these cities should use it for? As I saw it's my phone. Do you think these cities should use it for a middle mile network to connect their anchor institutions within the city, or are you talking about like they should never get into business at all?
I am always super dumbfounded. It's 2021, and there's still cities and municipalities that have been getting money for years and years and years that don't have their main things wired up. It always floors me that they don't. To me, that should already be done. All right, if that isn't done, then absolutely.
So hold on a second, Travis. Let me just clarify.
Yep.
So someone has wired up the schools and libraries and the police stations. You're saying that it's pretty dumb that the municipalities haven't done it themselves.
I have no idea why. I don't want to pick on Minneapolis, so I'll move to St. Paul. Why doesn't St. Paul have the public schools have a fiber network hooking up all their schools? Why are they using CenturyLink in 2021?
In this case, because of free money. let's go full circle. The way the E-rate program has been structured, it makes it really easy I
don't know, but it's dumbfounding to me. And then you move out to another town here in Minneapolis or in Minnesota, all their schools are hooked up. Like the county, all the county buildings are hooked up. What the heck's the difference between the county and the city when it came to allocation of money in the past, and how did they use it? Which leads me to Doug's point of, I think here's what's going to happen. Some cities are going to get $20-30 million. They're going to stick up 6 hotspots in downtown Minneapolis for Wi-Fi, or in their town, make a big deal out of it. And where's the rest of the money going to go? Who knows? It'll just disappear.
I hope it won't be that bad. But my thing is just to look at this. the CARES Act to me suggests that there's a lot more good than bad. Whether it was townships in Minnesota, whether it was the state of Alabama and Mississippi, who really used that money for broadband connectivity in smart ways, I think. I think there's going to be waste and there's going to be some bad situations, but I think we're going to see more good than bad out of this.
See, the states put some rules on place for CARES in almost every case. They didn't just go, little town in Mississippi, here's your check. They said it's got to be used for one of 40 things. Talk to us about it. If we all agree, you can use it that way. And so there was enough rules around it that it got used. I would agree, CARES money got used pretty well from what I hear most places. But this money it's likely not to have those rules on it. That makes me a bit nervous in that, a lot of communities are not going to be prepared to do anything good with it. Now, some of them may just blow me away and do awesome things. 2024 is enough time to get ready. But we can't have 14,000 cities run out and try to find a broadband consultant to tell them how to use their money. Because we can help the first 300 of them, and then the other 13,000 are on their own.
But I think that's going to be the problem too, Doug, not to kind of put some poo-poo on your profession, but the consultants are going to come out of the woodwork who have no idea what they're doing.
Everyone.
No. Some of them have built school networks, and so they are perfectly capable of designing fiber to the home to 20,000 distinct premises.
I thought we were going to do feasibility studies, Chris. Isn't that what we're doing?
Travis, you owe me $50,000 for the one I did for you.
Exactly. Yes.
Some of these consultants have been playing games online for the last 3 years, and now they're going to help people design networks.
Yeah. No.
And I think that's going to be a real problem.
Okay, so let's stop laughing at them. And what do we do to advise them? Like, what do you look for? Like right now, the market's getting hot. What do you look for? In terms of how to spend this money wisely.
I think first of all, if you're going to hire a consultant, or you're going to first of all, get advice from networks that actually have been built. Consultants who've been doing this for a long time and have a track record of success. Don't find somebody who just came out of college or has their master's degree who took a lot of courses and say they can solve your problems.
Or who is the mayor's son or whatever.
Or who's the mayor's son, yeah. Find people who have a track record and who have success behind their name, right? But yeah, it's going to be interesting of what they should do to partner, but there's going to be a lot of wasteful money because of people partnering with the wrong people who say the right things, who speak these and give these great slick presentations. I always say if your presentation's too slick, you've been focusing on creating your presentation and not actually doing any work.
You're saying there's a lot of money out there for fast talkers. What are those things that people should say?
My sales pitch is easy. I always go, don't hire the guys who are just here with the ties on.
Yeah.
Usually
I feel like
it's a tie-dye guy.
I feel like you're wearing a lot of ties.
Where are all these contractors going to come from? Where's all this fiber going to come
That's
from?
one of the key questions I want to ask you all.
Who's going to build it? Exactly.
Yeah, where's all? It's hard to get stuff now. You want to talk about electronic shortages? I mean, if you haven't, we put our fiber orders in a year in advance. We're now starting to put them in 2 years ahead of time.
Right.
For duct, handholds, fiber, conduit. It doesn't matter if you had all the tea in China trying to get more of this stuff. It's just not it's not down at Walmart. So you've got to, I don't know where these networks are how they're going to be built. And, I guess at some point I'd like to understand, how did Utopia become successful when so many of these other ones kind of tanked?
Because they hired me, Travis. I don't know
what are we talking about.
So, isn't the road littered with these ones that didn't make it?
No. So. The road is littered with just trying not to get too blue. Boy, it's one of those days for me, I'm censoring myself.
I live in a red state. So, I can speak for make sure you're red.
I'm just curious. I always hear about all these
Utopia
failures.
is one of the failures that people are constantly referring to. And that's the thing, is that the number of these networks that are called failures needed time to sort themselves out. And there are some people that still call Chattanooga failure and use flawed, outdated numbers. They never actually understood what they were describing to claim that. So when you say all these
Utopia struggled like crazy for the first 5-6 years, no doubt about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yet again, Doug, it was before I was hired. So the success of Utopia started right around 2010. I happened to start in 2010.
Well, but we have laughed, but it is true. And I think that's my biggest fear with all of these. There's not enough Dougs and Kims running around to execute these networks successfully. This is going to fall on some administrator's lap, and it's like, oh God, now I got to build a fiber network. So he's going to call up some consultant, and they're going to do a feasibility study, Mitchell Consulting, for 50 grand.
Let's hold on a second, right?
It's a real
Travis,
issue.
When you and I talked about this, and I was just like, and I was saying, okay, so let's just say that St. Paul wanted to do something.
Yep.
And what does that mean? Are they gonna have to try and poach your crews? How does that work? And you were like, oh, there's this firm, and they can do the work, and that's who I would kind of trust. As long as a lot of the cities are trying to do things that are not actually connecting the customers and doing billing and stuff like that. Is there capacity in the market to do a lot of this work so that you can sink a lot of the money into the expensive items, even if you can't turn on as many customers as you would like until later because of equipment shortages and things like that?
Well, it depends how many hooks come with the money. That's what always worries me. Are they just going to say, here, we want conduit down this street and we're willing to pay $12 a foot to get it done? Yeah. But do they want to have 10,000 meetings and oversight and a bunch of PowerPoint presentations? Then there's not enough cash there to do it, because that's all expense. Do they really want to build a network, or do they want to talk about building a network? There's two very distinct differences. And
a lot of people want to talk about it, and they don't want to actually operationalize it at all.
Oh, I get that all the time. I offer anyone a shovel and a job if they actually want to come help, because talk is cheap at the end of the day. That's why I've been curious about some of these networks, because I always find that there's very highly competent people that run them to make them successful. They just don't cross their fingers and dream. Mm-hmm. And where are all these people going to come from?
I think I think the biggest quality we have here at Utopia of the people who've been here for the longest is being stubborn. And I think that's more than anything else, is that we didn't want it to fail, that this is a passion for us, that we believe that this is the right way. And I don't think that you find that passion.
The passion,
in other places.
You got it. Passion and competence to be able to.
Let's talk about this though. What is the scale of Utopia to work with multiple cities in multiple states? What is your limitation? At what point are you? Kim, you haven't had a weekend free in a year, from what I can tell.
Well, no, I really haven't. Thanks for saying that I have a great social life, Chris.
Well, you can't have a social life when Roger keeps calling you at all hours of the day.
He's on vacation this week, so this is when my week that I'm just gonna cut out of work early.
Oh, so I actually picked you up. You're headed to the bar to get cocktails when I called you to beg you to join.
He's in Hawaii, so we're not jealous of him at all right now. But no, I think it is. We've talked about that with a lot of our partners, some of our contractors, of the ability to scale to make sure this happened. We have some of the best. We have some of the best construction crews and conduit people, and they've said, as big as you want to get, we can scale. And they haven't slowed us down thus far. But with the many amount of requests that we're receiving on the daily right now across the country, we are going to have a limit of how fast we can grow, because we have to protect the entity of Utopia. We don't want to get too big and lose all of our core values that we've spent the last 11 years to get to this point. And that's a huge concern, because you don't want to grow too fast and lose what made you this project special to begin with.
And those contractors will lose their ability to scale very quickly here, because all their employees are going to get poached by people willing to pay more. And this is a good time to be a fiber technician.
Doug, you're hiring one person. It seems like you should be hiring 5 people. What's your challenge right now with you've already worked with 1,000 clients. What's it going to take to get to 2,000 next year?
2 more people. No, I don't know. No, the issue is I'm like her. I actually only took 3 days off last year. So how many people can I train? So,
it's true.
By the way, if anyone is looking for a job, I haven't found a good person yet. So this is a job ad right here. So
you're like, here I am. Do you want to work with me?
Yeah,
well, this is something that Angela Seifer and I had talked about. Is that it's incredibly hard. I feel like a lot of us have, if we could go back in time, one of the things we would do is groom a heck of a lot more people to have background skills 5 years ago, because we do not have a pipeline of people ready to deal with the number of jobs in cities, ISPs, states. There's just there's very few people that have the skills that we would like without having to do a bunch of background.
If I had done that 5 years ago, I could triple the size of my business this coming year easily.
But you had no idea, right? We had no idea we were going to get a pandemic. And I think
5 years ago, I had some rough years. So yeah, I didn't know this was coming.
it's going to be interesting. I mean, I do think, like, I had a conversation with some people in the industry of how do we groom younger people to come in this industry who want to be in the broadband industry. And I'm like, because it's a really sexy industry when you talk about it. Do you want to go into this, or do you want to go in and talk about bits and ponds and B-lands all day?
Now, I want to come back to you, Travis, because I feel like you're a person with an open mind, and then any idea I bring to you, like, oh, let's try to think it out. And I feel like different cities have come to you with ideas about how they might be able to build a network and attract you or something like that. And here you are being like, why would I ever do that? Why would you?
I also felt there needed to be somebody at the table that played the devil's advocate, because, there's this whole, they print all this money and they start spreading it around. I guess selfishly, are we going to get a taste of it? No, I highly doubt it. So we're going to keep hooking people up every day, all day long.
Well,
but do I think that this is a great topic for this podcast? Well, we're going to keep talking about this forever, because this is a problem that's, I don't know.
But Travis, I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, this is what you and I are talking about. Like, if the city of Minneapolis actually, I shouldn't say the whole city. If the city councilors wanted to do something other than just complain about the state of things, if they wanted to, say, put a few $1 million, maybe 10, into conduit in the hardest neighborhoods of you to return to get a return, would you work with them on it, or would you just say, look, I've had 15 years of working with you folks, and all you want to do is have meetings and create problems, and I don't trust you?
At this point in our evolution, I don't need the funding anymore. So I'd rather just do it myself, because literally I could submit a permit today, get it approved in a week, have the crews out there a week later, and we're done. Whenever I historically involve, I hate to call it government, but when people that just want to talk, again, are we going to talk, or are we going to do it?
Mm-hmm.
People that want to talk will talk for years and years and years and years, and we'll never get anywhere. So I'm also a completist. I like to complete the project and move on to the next project. And the issue with that I have seen historically is these municipalities have had bond financing available to them since the day we hooked up our first customer. They have tax revenue like coming out of into them like crazy. I wish I had this problem. And they have done nothing to this point. So I find it just easier to do it myself.
Let's talk about a city that doesn't have a Travis, though, because most cities don't. There's only a handful of people doing what Travis is doing. Another city the size of Minneapolis could take this money. There's no reason they couldn't go build fiber to public housing and all sorts of other things and just get that done for all time. I hope that they use it smartly like that. Connect the schools, connect public housing, connect poor neighborhoods, build the conduit in those poor neighborhoods, because that's the only way those places, if they don't have a Travis, are ever going to get anything. So I think there are ways to use it, and that's just infrastructure. That's not creating an ISP. Build the conduit to all those places and turn around to somebody and go, now there's no rules. Please come use it.
But Doug, let me ask you this. Conduit and fiber have been around for 20 years.
Yeah.
Why all of a sudden now?
Because last year changed everything. I mean, I think it is really worth noting that, we've seen this now, because this is really worth exploring. It's a really good question, Travis. I've been wrestling with this and trying to figure out what we're really seeing. There is a new reality. I don't know what the dimensions of the new reality are, but it involves the White House talking about this in a different way. It involves unprecedented amounts of money. It involves local leaders taking this seriously in ways that are packing my calendar. And so for 5 years, we've heard people saying, it's different now, we get it, but they really didn't. It was about them using those words. But the pandemic, and not just the pandemic, the 6 months after the pandemic started, or when I saw real changes and people realized that they actually had to do something and stop talking. So I do think it is different now.
It's a temporary window, though. It's a temporary window, because if we don't do something in 3 or 4 years, it's going to be behind us again.
And Kim, what were you going to say?
I agree with Travis though, because I don't think that we hear about financing being the biggest issue of these projects. And I don't think it's financing. People do have, a lot of these cities do have the bonding capacity to do this. It's more about political will and having the appetite to bite off and say, I'm going to take this challenge on.
I've always said that right
people,
now, Hennepin County, the city of Minneapolis, I think it's mostly the state, the federal government are putting $2 billion into a light rail train into a suburb. $2 billion. And I don't want to get into like a lot of stuff around light rail. I don't want to be commenting on that, but that's enough money that, Travis, I would guess that we could get a fiber to just about everyone inside the 694, 494 corridor for $2 billion.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
That's an astonishing amount of money. It comes down to political will.
And which of those two is more valuable for the life of the city? It's pretty obvious. It's the conduit.
The entire region. We're talking about 2 million people. Like, I mean, I don't know, 1.5 million, 3 million. I don't know, something like that. Like,
yeah, but Doug, you know, if
they did that, those people wouldn't need a light rail. They could all work at home. So.
but if you could help some of these smaller ISPs, remember back in '95 there was 197 of us just here in the Twin Cities. If you could help some of these smaller ISPs get going, then I think you could build out these networks. Now, you either do it through, you know, giving them conduit, or maybe to Kim's point, there's just not people around anymore that want to be in this industry. Maybe it's just us four, you know, that think this is cool. I'm
so happy you think I'm in the industry, Travis. I thought I was one of the talkers.
Yeah. No, I don't. All I look at this is just another bucket of money that is coming in that we're going to talk about. This is just April 2021's bucket. There'll be a new bucket next year that we'll talk about and all the great things it's going to do. But
no, I don't think so. I think this is like a bucket that's like a once in a lifetime bucket. Like I don't know. I mean, especially because I mean, again, I don't want to get too political or into things. Yeah. I'm not like a big, like, you know, I don't understand everything about money and economics and I mostly had to take macroeconomics in grad school under a haze of painkillers because I had surgery and it just worked out that I was always at my highest point during macroeconomics. And so I really struggled there. It's a personal
At least
thing,
they weren't recreational painkillers.
Right,
Chris,
that's right. Yeah. So I was still ahead of most of the rest of the class, perhaps. So, but the thing is that like, I'm curious to see what the consequences are of spending as much money as we are right now with the amount of debt that we were previously had as a country. I do not think that this kind of window will be open in this way again, at least for a generation, possibly ever. So this is a one-time thing, and I hope that people are able to spend it well.
Well,
so
fingers crossed.
I wanted to talk about a couple other things. One is E-rate. Any reactions, Doug? You're probably following this closer than anyone else. It looks to me like the FCC is getting ready to take about the $10 billion of augmentation to the E-rate program and really wants to design rules that basically are only available to schools wasting it on non-structural changes that will not have an effect on anyone as soon as the money runs out.
Oh, you just summarized it quite well. I agree. Yes, it looks to me like that's what they're talking about.
My nightmares are true.
Yes, sir. That's how I see it too. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about between New York and Los Angeles County, New York City and Los Angeles County. I believe they have spent more than $1 billion on hotspots for cellular connectivity alone to give to low-income students. You could have solved permanently public housing access in both of those places entirely with that much money.
Right. And where did that money go? It went to Verizon and AT&T. I mean, the pandemic's been very good to those two companies. So, and that's what I think is going to happen to a whole lot more of this money before it's done. So.
Oh, good. I'm glad you said it, Doug, because you know, Comcast, Verizon, AT&T, they're going to get most of this cash one way or another.
One way
You're
or the
breaking
other.
my heart, people. You're breaking my heart.
Okay, this is where I need
to I'm glad
defend.
Doug said it and I didn't. So
I need to defend Comcast for a second, right? Comcast is taking most of this money in $10 chunks at least. Charter's getting it in $30 chunks. They have wireless companies often in $20 chunks. Comcast has been the most responsible of all these companies. It was the best company for low-income folks before the pandemic. It is the only one that has behaved in any kind of responsible manner in the time since at a broad level, from what I can tell.
I agree.
Don't disagree.
Yeah.
I keep saying things that are killing the conversation.
Yeah, so I think we need a
Yeah,
challenge.
well, if you keep saying truthful things, we're just going to shake our head.
I'll make sure to fix that. Go ahead, Kim.
But think about it. It's really smart from their standpoint because it's hard to compete against $10.
Right.
So if you're a private ISP that's going to go into a public housing building and build it out, and your maximum uptake is going to be 25% of the people at $10, you know what? Comcast
You're not going to go there.
No, Comcast is genius for doing this. You think it's all, they're just holding their territory.
But I think it's
a smart way to do it.
We have to challenge it. We're working on stuff internally I can't announce yet here at Utopia, because I get the Comcast program has been successful, but it's still providing subpar broadband service and to low income housing. And how are you going to end systematic poverty is not by keeping people on subpar broadband service. So we need to have a $10 or so product that offers up to 100 or more.
Real
and
broadband.
I think,
yeah,
real
55
broadband.
is not real broadband. There's no two. Yeah. None of those houses have two kids working at the same time in their schoolwork.
So is
I think that's a change.
I like that, Kim.
City working with you on that, or is the public housing division working with you on that? You know how
right now we're working on doing a beta test. We had a meeting with some of the city leaders, and they understand the need for it, and we're like kind of putting the program together still and seeing what we can come up with. Yeah.
I would love to get an update in a few months of if you've actually made any progress on that.
No, and I think I think that's where we're going to change the conversation, is that just because you're economically disadvantaged, you should not be broadband disadvantaged. And if we're going to provide fiber to everyone, let's provide actually good quality service if we're doing it.
Mm-hmm. All right.
See, I think that the city should use this money to go to public housing complexes, not people who are scattered, and just give them broadband for the rest of forever for free.
Mm-hmm.
You just go, look, we're putting gigabit broadband in this building and everyone gets it for free. That's how to use this free money that's coming.
That's what I've said. I've said that I've thought that mayors, governors should set themselves a challenge and say in 18 months, every single person in public housing, in centralized public housing, not in section 9, section 8, I forget, section 8 vouchers, that everyone in a apartment building style public housing would have a high quality internet connection available as part of the rent. And actually there's a bill in Congress that would require that for future housing, which I think is a good thing. So it'd be nice to see that.
I like the EBB model better because it affords you can give effectively free, high speed, high quality internet away. The provider gets $50 a month, so there's enough money in there for you to build out.
Travis, but that's going to bankrupt. I mean, like, it's not going to bankrupt. It's hyperbole. The federal government spending $10 billion, $12 billion a year for the rest of time is not something that's likely to happen. And so that's where I think what Doug is saying is let's
change of administration. That program disappears overnight.
Yeah,
right. So and fair enough. But it at least puts enough dollars in the ISP that they can function. You're never going to compete against Comcast on these things. You just never will.
Well, I mean, they've already announced with EBB it's a short-term program until they run out of cash or at this time marker. Right. So we already know it's a program that's going to end at some point. So I think that Doug's point of providing it to low-income housing is what the Biden administration is wanting to do, to say what is the long-term solution.
Well, does it have to end though? I mean, if it was $10 billion a year, I mean, you know, how many billions are we talking about?
That's half of NASA's budget. Like, I mean, and like Doug said, I mean, it's a significant.
Hold on. How much is this 1.9 trillion?
Unfortunately, it's the kind of program that has a big red cross on it that people are it's a target to use.
Right. I mean, this is what we saw. I mean, when the Obama administration proposed extending the Reagan era $9 phone subsidy program to including mobile phones and a little bit of broadband data, he was accused with a whole bunch of really ugly rhetoric of trying to do this massive giveaway. I mean, these things become political. Yeah, they're called Obama phones.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, so I feel like it's a recipe for a program that starts again, stops again, and that sort of thing. And here's the thing that I tell cities that I've been talking with is that you've had this one-time money from the federal government. What you should be doing is figuring out how to spend as much of it as you can that you spend on broadband on things that will result in you having lower costs and benefits that will still be there after the money runs out. Like, that's the framework that I think you need to have. It's not, what do we do temporarily? It's really like, what can we build that we can continue to operate in a sustainable manner after that?
Well, you just went and did it again and just said the right thing, so we can't react.
Well, no, but what is it? No, I mean, but what is it? Because in any of these models, there's an ongoing operating expense attached to them. Just because you run some fiber around and you hook them into buildings, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
You actually need people to operate it?
Yeah, you need people to operate it. Who's going to answer the phone? I mean, the thing is that this is there has to be an ongoing...
but Travis, like this is where I feel like there's a number of different solutions to that. One is to say a lot of cities, like for instance, have run fiber to their public facilities, but they may not run it themselves. They have an RFP every 5 years, and they say like, here are our assets. We want you to operate this for us. And they have this competition in a process in which like you then select a vendor that will do the parts that the city doesn't want to do necessarily.
And so what, you have a bunch of people fighting over $10 a month internet accounts? No, I don't think anyone's going to respond to your RFP. So I'm not sure it's totally well thought out.
But they do. Yeah.
A lot of cities, all the customer service, tech support, and everything.
A lot of cities they do it, and the folks who do it are nonprofits. The nonprofits actually come in and do all that stuff for pretty cheap.
Okay.
Well, I think that goes back to the case for municipal broadband, because we do it. We have a customer service team. We're the one who's servicing them every day. But it is we're kind of a department of these municipalities who started us. So yeah, I think there's.
But you just said that you don't really have a bunch of low income housing on board yet, do you?
We have low income housing. We don't have a low income housing product that's out there that's published yet. No.
Okay. Well, I'll be curious about the economics of it.
Yeah. And I mean, here's where also there's this whole thing that's happening in parallel called digital navigators that we've touched on a little bit here and there in the past, in which we would expect that whether as part of this program or otherwise, the first touch point for instance, a recent immigrant who's getting a device from PCs for People, when they go back, if something goes wrong on that device, it should be to touch PCs for People or the nonprofit that PCs for People is working with, or the county library or the city library. It shouldn't be the ISP until it's clearly a problem with the ISP. And I think it's really important for people who are crafting these programs to understand that. Like Travis shouldn't have to answer his phone until it's very clear the problem is actually with his network, because he doesn't want to be troubleshooting someone on IE8.
But the reality is, because we answer the phone and maybe the nonprofit isn't open past 5 o'clock at night, we get the phone call on why their printer isn't working. And what are you going to do?
Oh, and I think that, I mean, for our sake, just to put it into context too, with the CARES Act money, we connected some homeless shelters around the area of Utah, which are a little low income. But yeah, but we work really tightly with the city, right? And I think that's the difference. Like, since we're kind of an arm of the city, it's a direct connection. When the homeless shelter calls the city, then we have this connection with them, which I think is just a little bit different, but I understand where you're coming from, Travis.
No. Yeah, we did that in Minneapolis. We put wireless and hotspots inside homeless shelters. And, honestly, if they were using their phone, we had almost no tech support issues. It's when they got a Windows computer. Oh my God, it was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. Trying to teach people that don't know, they just don't understand computers. They understood the phone really well. They just didn't understand PCs.
Well, I think that goes into the 3 things of digital equity, right? That we still need some advancement in, which is the education, the equipment, and the broadband. It's a 3-pronged approach.
I think these things are working themselves out to some extent. Like every year, there's a smaller population. It's not like there's a constant supply of new people coming in that don't understand how to use computers. Like the younger generation develops that in school. And so I feel like this is a problem that it's that bulge moving through the snake, and like it's getting through there. We're going to get our handle on it. And frankly, with upcoming legislation, I mean, Doug, you're doing pieces on your blog on the Accessible Affordable Internet for All Act. Given how much money we've gotten from ARPA that's going out right now, I'm more excited about the digital equity portions of AAIA than anything else, because I feel like that's the biggest unmet need right now.
Agreed. So, and I'm not going to be able to talk anymore because I'm kind of stuck on the bulge moving through the snake.
It's a hamster. I'm sorry to say. Small snake.
Oh, now there he goes. The 3 people that we had watching this are gone now.
Yeah.
Way to stop the conversation yet again.
We are going to have to stop it. Are there closing comments from anyone? I mean, this is something I feel like one of the things for cities is this sense of, in counties and whatnot, is find a qualified person to help you out. I do feel like it is a hard task, and I hope that cities and counties are able to do that. But I'm curious if people have any other advice that's sort of practical in terms of evaluating what to do based on what little we know. The rules are going to change, and we'll probably talk more about them when they do. But from what we know right now.
I agree with what you said, actually, which was try to find some way to use it that has a benefit that's still here 10 years from now. If you do that, you did all right. So
I think I'd agree with everything. And I think for all these cities is just really research this and continue to read as it all continuously comes out, because it's going to be evolving and changing. And don't set your eyes on just doing this product or doing this project, because it might change. So yeah, just continually have backup plans, and yet again, have the right partners in place. Start getting those partners in place right now, if you don't have them, or try to, and start vetting them.
Yeah, let me double down on that. Research it really. I mean, Doug writes a new post every week, but all the ones he's written in the past are still there. He has tags that allow you to go and search by subject to read past things. I myself, when I'm trying to find something, will often dig into 5G or one of his other tags. So small cells in 5G are a little duplicative, Doug, but at muninetworks.org, we do the same thing. If you're looking for background on states, if you want to read everything we've ever written about Utopia, we have tags about it. And I think it's really important to go back. And the way I would do it is to look at specific things that are relevant and then figure out who to talk to. We do too little talking to each other. Those conversations are important. And people are more willing to do a video chat now than they had been before. So I'd say do that. Travis, is there anything you want to leave as a final comment?
Well, I guess from what I've seen is, if I was a municipality or government entity, I would find somebody in the organization and give them the reins. If you haven't, the ones I've seen successful in Minnesota here is David Asp down in Ramsey County, and Clint Pyers in St. Louis Park. They've had the reins. They have awesome networks. I don't even know if these communities understand what they've developed, but somebody has been in charge and not a committee, and give them the budget, let them run it, and say, at least put conduit in the ground. We can figure out the fiber later. Just get some conduit on the ground. And spend the money wisely. Yeah.
Have an engineer with a plan that tells you how to put conduit in the ground.
At least an idea of what you're doing.
You don't want me with a shovel out there.
Yeah, some conduit is better than no conduit.
Bolts are helpful too, in the right spots.
Yeah, I'm not coming to Minneapolis because Travis is going to give me a shovel. So
yeah, we got to work. Yeah.
How do you think you earn the wings, Doug?
Yes.
I don't think, Chris, you've had a shovel too many times to earn those wings.
Oh no, Chris was out on a job site one time, and he looks down in the hole and goes, "Really? It's that much work?" I go, "Yeah, Chris, this is what a fiber network looks like on the ground."
It was not my first time someone tried to put me in a vault and close it up. I'll just want to put that out there. And I'll just note that so I've been without heat, without hot water for most of the past week. And
it shows.
It's I actually just took a shower before this, so y'all didn't have to smell me, fortunately. But we've been remodeling our basement. I personally excavated almost the entire basement. I broke up the concrete slab. I excavated it. I know how to use the shovel now, and I will never touch one again.
My first job was climbing those towers you keep showing pictures of. So
yeah,
I was glad to get out of that job.
No, and I think that anyone who's working in this space really should go out and see how a network works. I mean, we can make jokes about it, but it is really important to see it and to talk to the people that are doing it, because what they do in a normal life is really important to getting the policy right. So,
and I would invite anyone, if they want to make their way to Minneapolis and see how it comes together, I'm happy to show them, because it does really make sense once you see it in person versus talking about it on a whiteboard.
Yeah. And if anybody wants to talk about open access, you got me, but you might have to hear my bad jokes if you chat with me on the phone.
I've never heard a bad joke. I love them all. Well, thank you all.